Welcome to what I can almost guarantee is going to be the worst episode of the Atheist Experience ever.
Mic's off.
Oh, my mic's off. That's even better.
What's that off?
What? It's just broken?
Probably.
Oh, well, thank you for showing up. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? I'm actually watching the chat room, so if anybody wants to say something. Yeah, I see you in the chat room there. Is this mic also dead? No sound!
All right, we'll figure it out. I think that box has to come back on.
Yes, there's no sound.
We got it now.
What? Oh, is there sound now? Hello, can you hear me? Hello, hello, check, testing, 1, 2, 3. Okay, can you guys in the chat room hear me? Because you are going to have to be heavily involved today. They're still yelling no sound. Okay, I'm still talking. Blah, 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 blah. Turn up the fucking... Yes, yes, I can see you bitching at me in the chat room.
Yes, we are following your advice.
What? Oh, okay. Can you hear me now? Can you guys hear me now? You guys can hear me now. And if you think that that last few minutes was painful, wait till you see the rest of the show, because today we've got the show from hell. We've got the ultimate Murphy's Law to end all shows. So here's what's happening. I showed up today. Jeff D is supposed to be my co-host. Jeff D is not here, and Jeff D is not reachable by phone. The phones are not working. So basically, you get to watch. This is an exciting one-time opportunity. For the next 57 minutes, you get to see me die on the air. Along with my sacrificial lamb here, first-time guest, Erica, who I don't think is mic'd yet. Uh-oh, I'm going to lose my mic. Okay, we may not even get Erica because there probably is not another mic that is working. I just lost this one.
Can you guys hear me on?
Yeah, can you guys hear her?
Can anyone hear me on this?
Yes.
What? Okay, well, anyway, I don't know if you guys can hear her. Okay, I'm hearing yes, yes, yes in the chat room. The chat room is going to be my only link to the outside world today, but I got stuff to do. Let's see, I recently did an Ask Me Anything thread on Reddit, so I can elaborate on crap that people ask me in there. I got the Atheist Experience blog open. I got Iron Chariots open to the page of Common Theist Arguments, so if necessary, we can wing it on Pascal's wager for half an hour, whatever. How you doing, Erica?
Pretty well.
How long have you been watching the show?
Since May.
Okay. And were you expecting to be co-hosting with me today?
No.
Okay. Well, everybody say hi to Erica. And let's see. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do the long version of the intro. The Atheist Experience is sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin, a nonprofit organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. We are live now for 1 hour every week from 4:30 to 5:30, and we're normally a live call-in show, and we absolutely love to get theist callers, just not today. We also host a weekly internet podcast called The Nonprofits. You can check that out at www.nonprofitsradio.com. That's PROPHETS. And there actually was a live show yesterday, and those of you who have been going through Nonprofits withdrawals because we were, not having regular shows for about 6 months there, will be happy to know that we have got some great shows in the can now, and we're going to be continuing to do it on through the year. There's some new stuff going on with the dinner arrangements. I think we are looking to move to another location besides Threadgills. So what's going to happen today is that we're going to keep going to Threadgills for the rest of the month, for the days that we're actually doing the shows and not off on holiday. And then starting in January, I think the plan, but keep watching the show and we'll try to announce it on the blog or something. I think we're going to start out going to El Arroyo. It's a Mexican restaurant downtown. And then after that, we're actually going to discuss what's going to happen next. But basically, keep showing up to Threadgills today, and we're going to have a crappy show today, and you guys are just going to have to deal with it. So first of all, Erica, do you have any comments or questions as just a person who usually watches the show? You're the only caller today,
Okay.
so to speak. I'm sorry. I don't mean to put you on the spot. Guys, if you have a question right there in the chat room, then you can throw it out. If anybody thinks that somebody has asked a really good question, just paste it over and over again until I see it. Ordinarily, I make fun of the atmosphere in the chat room, but today I'm grateful to have you guys. What?
How about you use a call screening app, and I'll relay questions to you that way.
Call screening app. Which one is that?
The webpage we use every week.
Oh, the web page. The web page was not working. Tell you what, come fiddle with my computer and see if you can get it to load. Or actually, no, that's a bad idea because the computer is the only source of content I have right now. So, let's see.
Atheist Experience.org/caller list.
Okay, hold on. Slash caller list.
Maybe
I should. Oh, yeah, there they are.
maybe
list
for
the
a while we
callers.
could talk about atheist with Christian families this time of year during the holidays.
Do you happen to be an atheist with a Christian family?
Yes,
this time
I
of
am.
year? I would love to hear all about that.
Okay. So, my husband and I are planning to go up to Montana to visit my parents for Christmas.
Okay.
And
Oh, that wonderful phone noise is there.
okay. And
Yeah, go on. Just ignore it.
so my family is Catholic.
Uh-huh.
I was Catholic till college, and my husband was raised Jewish and is also atheist. So we're going,
Yes.
and my
So
parents
is
don't
your
know
husband's-
yet that I'm atheist.
Okay, is your husband's family like practicing Jews, or are they all just atheist Jews? Because, I mean, atheist
Most-
Jews, I happen to know, are a pretty common thing.
Yeah, mostly atheist Jews. I think he has an aunt who's an Orthodox.
Okay.
So
But I imagine that he doesn't hang out with her as much as the rest
no,
of the family.
no.
Okay, so what kind of conversations are you expecting? Oh, so wait, we're catching you before the fireworks. They haven't found out that you're an atheist. Is that what
No,
you're saying?
exactly.
Okay, and your husband, being Jewish and an atheist, is probably not going to fake being Catholic in any way. So first there's going to be the uncomfortable conversation about, oh, so you're not a Christian, but they're still going to think he's a Jew.
Well,
And then...
yes. Well, right now they do know that he's Jewish, and I told them he's very secular and non-practicing,
Okay,
which
how
they
do
were okay with.
They were, okay.
If I said atheist, it would probably suddenly be completely different. And
Yeah. Even though very secular Jew is almost indistinguishable from atheist in most cases.
generally speaking,
Yeah.
yes. And about me,
And
they know that
don't
I'm not
know that.
Catholic anymore.
Okay. Do they think you have an alternative?
I believe they think that I am still Christian. I'm not positive.
Okay.
I'm
See,
doing the sort of sneaking slowly out of the closet.
See, I'm sure that some people have already heard this story before, but with my fiance, first of all, they found out that she was atheist after finding out that the guy she was dating was atheist. And with me, you know, I actually have my own show, so it's a difficult thing to keep quiet.
Yes.
And so we've gone back and forth on trying to figure out whether to continue talking to them, but I don't want to air out too much family stuff on the air, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But let's see what the chat are. Oh, okay. We got some guy in the chat room called Lord and Savior 332, and he's yelling in all caps, "Everyone quiet but me, and I will pwn." So you've got my attention for like 10 seconds, Lord and Savior, but if you don't say something fast, then it's going to be boring, because I'm just going to be sitting here staring at this screen. So I am listening only to Lord and Savior. Type something fast. No, we can't get Skype set up this fast. It's not as easy as you think, so shut up. Do. Okay, I don't even have a watch, but I'm making the little watch watching noises.
Your computer has a watch.
Lord and Savior, you're on the spot. Nope, too late. Time's up. You're gone. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with blog posts. Because, let's see, we had a recent post on the blog where some guy just started going off on us, and I replied to him. So he started out by saying, I would like to know how and why atheists can knowledgeably ignore the laws of physics when considering such things as creation. And you have to understand that I'm going to read this interspersed with my replies, but this is one giant block paragraph. So I said, it's interesting that you would say that because it turns out that physicists tend to be atheists far more than most people. According to fairly recent surveys, while around 85% of people in the world believe in some kind of God, somewhere around 60% of practicing physical scientists have doubts about the existence of God. And among members of the National Academy of Sciences, one of the most elite groups of scientists in the world, only about 7% of them are believers. By the way, this blog is at atheistexperience.blogspot.com. So if you're into that sort of thing, you can read along with me. Let's see. So it seems, I said, that the more advanced a person is in scientific disciplines, the less likely they are to believe in God. Maybe you should take up your question with some of them. Then the emailer goes on to say, all the laws of physics prove that nothing can come from nothing. So how did this universe come into existence if not from nothing? Where did that original something, most often referred to as matter or some other form, come from? I wrote, Big Bang Theory doesn't attempt to address this question. The universe came to its present state around, well, I said 14.5 billion years ago in the post, but then I was corrected by our great commenters, and it's actually 13.7 billion years ago. I always get those numbers mixed up. Before that, everything in the universe was compressed into a small enough state that known laws of physics can't be applied properly. Therefore, the Big Bang is not an assertion that anything came from nothing, could have always existed, could have been generated out of matter from a meta-universe, could have spontaneously come into existence through a matter-antimatter reaction. The responsible perspective is to accept that we don't know, and we won't know until a new way to collect evidence is worked out. You, on the other hand, seem to believe that you do know, and your belief is that the universe was actually created from nothing by a being who either always existed or in turn came into existence from nothing itself. I think it's remarkable that you don't see the irony in that position. I'll break up the letter and see if my co-host has anything to input. Or I won't.
No.
Okay. Let's see. He goes on to say, more importantly, I'd like you to address cosmological singularity, which has been accepted by most, if not all, physicists, concluding that there is and always has been a God. I said, I don't know where you're getting your information from, although my guess would be that it's from a certain part of your body. As I've already pointed out, you can get actual information from scientists about how much they believe in God, and it's considerably less than the general public. Besides which, even scientists who do believe in God would very rarely claim that this belief is in some way scientifically proven. Most of them hold to some form of Stephen Jay Gould's idea of non-overlapping magisteria, claiming that faith in God and scientific evidence should be held as dealing with separate domains. Almost no formal papers have ever been published in mainstream peer-reviewed scientific journals addressing the question of any God's existence, and those that have slipped through are generally not cited as relevant by any other scientific works. This is so widely acknowledged that creationists routinely claim that the scientific establishment is involved in a massive conspiracy against their work. This is, of course, baseless paranoia, since the reason their work doesn't get published is that it's a load of poorly supported pseudoscientific quackery. The writer goes on to say, therefore disproving the core of atheist beliefs. In such a society today that is so scientifically based, it is ignorant to ignore such things as cosmological singularity, as well as other laws of physics, including Einstein's relativity, that's with an I-E, and quantum mechanics, which even led Einstein to believe in the existence of God. I said, somebody's been lying to you, dude. And then I quoted, it was, of course, a lie what you read about my religious convictions, a lie which is being systematically repeated. I do not believe in a personal God, and I have never denied this, but have expressed it clearly. If something is in me which can be called religious, then it is the unbounded admiration for the structure of the world so far as our science can reveal it. That's Albert Einstein in a letter from March 24th, 1954. Then he writes, thank you for your time, though you'll be wasting your efforts trying to disprove the laws of the universe to justify your living in denial. And I said, thanks for the vote of confidence, ta-ta. Now, whenever I write an email like this, I always am waiting for the other shoe to drop, because sometimes I wind up being roped for several days into a long, annoying conversation until I just decide that the person is just going around circles with me, at which point I just stop answering. So I was expecting a detailed rebuttal of that, and instead I got this. LOL, you actually wasted your time to reply to me? Ha 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 ha! Exclamation point, 1. Thank you so much for making my day. Ha ha ha, thank you. Wow, you really would waste your time like this, wouldn't you? Ha ha ha, I'm glad to know that you care enough about your public to reply to this. Ha ha ha, you're a fool. By the way, my email contained a virus. Have a wonderful life, and then die. I should note, as somebody who's somewhat savvy about computer science, having a master's degree in the subject, you do need to have some sort of attachment in order for a virus to work, and there wasn't one. I heard you can actually embed a virus in a picture, but there are no pictures either. Somebody in the comments wrote in, below is a reproduction of a text attachment sent along with the mail. This is meant to be a deadly virus, but I didn't have the technology to write it. So please delete all your important data from your hard drive manually and send this copy of this email to 50 of your friends. Thank you for your cooperation. This virus works on the honor system. I love our commenters. All right, so I'm going to make the rounds. That blog post is over. I'm going to check to see if anybody has sent me a message from the caller list. Nobody has. It says, Russell, keep an eye on this. Chat room questions, maybe. For those of you who are just tuning in, we've had a giant cluster F today. The phone lines are not working. My regular co-host, Jeff D., did not manage to show up today. And sitting with me in his place is the lovely Erica. Say hi to everyone, your adoring fans.
Hello.
Let's see. Do you want to say some more stuff about your family or Christmas? What it was like growing up with them?
Well, actually, growing up, I was pretty religious.
You were. How long have you not been pretty religious?
Let's see, probably since I was about 16, so 6 years or so.
Okay. So for the last 2 years or so, you were living with them and they still thought you were religious, but you weren't.
Yes.
And you managed to hide it for, since then,
Yeah.
how many years?
6.
6 more years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is that a cumulative total of 8 years or a total of 6 years?
A total of 6 years.
Okay. Okay, so we get questions all the time. We get emailers all the time bringing up a situation that is not within my realm of experience, which is I recently figured out I'm an atheist. I'm 15, 16. My parents would be infuriated if I came out to them. What should I do? Do you have any words of advice for those people?
Let's see. To be honest, I'm not really sure what to suggest.
That's exactly what we always say.
Yeah, it varies a lot by family.
Yeah.
And
Do you regret at all not having come out to your family earlier, or do you think that it was good to just keep it under wraps this long?
I don't know. One thing that I still haven't decided if I'm ever going to tell them.
Okay. You think there's a chance it might not actually come out during this trip?
I think so, yes. So,
Okay.
In the event that it doesn't, see, one thing is, I know if I tell them, they will become extremely worried about my soul.
Your eternal soul, yes.
And extremely concerned. And I would feel guilty to put that kind of pressure on them,
Okay.
for one.
It's not your fault, you know.
Yes. Yes, but I would feel bad.
Okay. A lot of people think that way. I should correct my earlier statement. When I said the phones aren't working, what I mean is that we can't get the phones into the studio, and that's still the case, right?
Yes, is
Yes.
your webpage working?
My webpage is working. So what I should have said is, if you have a question that can be summed up in a few sentences, feel free to call the regular number, which is. It says phones are out, no calls today. I'm sure everybody in the chat room knows it though, right? Okay.
I don't know that we can get that to work.
All right, but feel free to call the show, and what's going to happen is, if you can say what you have to say in a few sentences and bring up interesting topics of conversation,
That's
then
not working.
the
That depends on the call box. The line from the outside world goes in the call box.
yeah, but they can call you, and you can screen calls, right? And then you can forward the message to me. No? Never mind.
It's not working.
Okay.
Okay, where is this note coming from? It says that from someone named Pombolo.
Yeah, it's a person that chat room.
Oh, you're getting that from the chat room. Okay, so you monitor the chat room, you send the important ones to me,
Yes.
and then I answer those.
Yes.
That is a
Okay.
great idea, thanks. Because frankly, I'm not going to be able to read the chat room fast enough. Okay, so Pombolo in the chat room says, what's the best way to have a conversation with a religious person when you have one of those infuriating middle ground smartasses? I would like to quote the great work of art, War Games, which says that the only way to win is not to play.
Yeah.
And here's what I mean by that. When I gave a lecture a couple years ago on how to be a sort of atheist evangelist, one of the things that I said is the most important to keep in mind is who's your audience. If you are going to go into an argument with the idea in mind that you're going to make this person see reason and convert them, you're going to be really, really frustrated with a lot of conversations you have. It rarely happens that anybody actually makes a big conversion. And when it does happen, you know, everybody likes to think of people becoming Christians in this big, you know, epiphany, like, you know, the road to Damascus. Oh, I see the light all of a sudden. And then they naturally ask, what one thing happened that made you an atheist, right? In my case, no one thing happened that made me an atheist because I was raised with atheist parents. I know in Matt's case, he was studying to be a minister, and reading and studying about Christianity actually gradually turned him atheist over time. And Matt's story actually seems to be the most common one that I hear from ex-Christians, because what happens is people have to come to the idea themselves that that just relying on faith and not having reasons for stuff is not such a great idea. And so through a long process of reading and thinking about it and trying to actually prove that God exists is what usually gets them there. But there are quite a lot of people who are stubborn enough that they're never going to change their minds. So when I say think about who your audience is, if you're targeting an audience of one, if you're just targeting this guy that you're arguing with, why waste your time? I mean, you might actually do it for fun. You might do it because you want to learn about arguments that might become relevant later if you can repeat them. But for me, the reason to do a TV show like this is to reach a whole lot of people. Because if you can have a bunch of people watching you argue with a stubborn Christian, then the audience that's watching you might wind up saying, oh man, that guy is just being kind of a douche. You know, he's not really listening to the other person's points. He's trying to prove the existence of God, but he's throwing up this weak sauce that that is not getting anywhere. And the only reason he's not budging is because you know, he's believed this way for a long time, and he's kind of in the mindset of not listening to anyone. The atheist, by contrast, sounds a lot more reasonable. So let's see. But this question was specifically asking, what do you do when you have one of those middle ground smartasses? So let's say that you are talking with this person in front of a group of people, like an internet chat room or a crowd at a party or something, and this person says, let's say for the middle ground, oh, I don't like those smart-ass atheists because, you know, they're just fundamentalist, exactly like their fundamentalist Christian counterparts. What am I going to say about that? Basically, first of all, the important thing to throw out in front is that being an atheist is not mutually exclusive with being an agnostic. I mean, just because you're an atheist, it's actually a common apologetics tactic to say, oh, if you're an atheist, then you must say you know absolutely without a shadow of a doubt that there is no God and never can be. That's not atheism. Most sources, I mean, most people who talk about atheism, I mean, you got George Martin, who defines atheism as being without any belief in gods. You even have like Richard Dawkins, who in The God Delusion said, okay, if there was a scale from 1 to 7 where 1 is absolutely convinced with no possible doubt that that God exists as a 1, and then, number 4 being sort of a middle of the road, absolutely don't know or care one way or the other, and then a 7, which is absolutely positive and convinced and cannot be talked out of the idea that there is no God. Richard Dawkins said I would be a 6, or he would be a 6.5 maybe. But his point is, and there's been some argument in the atheist community, but his point is that you can't really take a position where there is no possible way for me to change my mind and be talked about it, because be talked out of what I think, because any new evidence could come up tomorrow that could completely throw. I mean, an example that's usually given in scientific terms is how Einstein's theories of relativity and quantum mechanics supplanted eventually Newton's laws of motion. It didn't happen all of a sudden. It just happened because there were certain observations which could not be explained purely in Newtonian terms. And so eventually, even though this system had worked for hundreds of years, they had to come to a point where they admitted, yes, Newtonian physics is not the way the world works, or at least it's not the whole story. There has to be some more to it. So what does this have to do with atheism? My point is that most of the atheists I know characterize themselves as atheist agnostics. They don't characterize themselves as positive. But there has to be a certain point where you recognize that you know enough to say that in general something probably doesn't exist. On the show we always bring up the examples of whatever mythological being pops into our head fastest. Unicorns, fairies, leprechauns, any of those come up. If you were going to ask me flat out, are you positive that no fairies exist and could ever exist? I would say, well, I'm a fairy agnostic. But I certainly do not believe in fairies. I think that it would be ridiculous for a grown-up to believe in fairies. There's no good reason for it. Could happen that a fairy comes up and bites me tomorrow, and I wind up, looking at it and coming up with clear, absolute, irrefutable proof, to the extent that science allows that sort of thing, that this thing I'm looking at is definitely a fairy. But that hasn't happened yet, and it hasn't happened with God, and you have to watch out for theists, but trying to make these tricky hypothetical arguments like, well, if I presented this incredible irrefutable evidence, then would you start believing in God? I'd say yes, but nothing like that ever comes up. So going back to the middle ground smartass that Pombolo was talking about, you don't have to be completely agnostic and say that it's equally likely for God to exist or not exist. It may be that a God could turn up, but there is an overwhelming, complete lack of evidence for a God, and the smart thing to do is just not believe in it. So that's my answer. I'm going to go on to the next call. Or not call, but this is someone who's in the chat room right now. This is Arianna from Coffs Harbour, Australia. She says, my husband and I still celebrate Christmas, but we're not sure whether or not to tell our kids about Santa. Is telling my kids that Santa exists the same as telling my kids that gods exist? Do you want me to go over to you, or would you rather I just keep monologuing?
I'd like to talk about this briefly.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Let's see. With things like Santa, I think is more important ultimately is what happens when you tell your kids that Santa does not exist. How do you explain that? And do you draw any parallels between gods? Mm-hmm. When you're saying, no, he doesn't exist. It was something we did to bring charm to your childhood.
Were you told about Santa as a kid?
Yeah.
Okay. And they took it seriously. Was your husband, the very secular Jew, also
No.
told about Santa? Okay. Does he in any way feel that his childhood was stolen because of that?
No.
Okay. I think there's your answer.
Okay, yeah.
We, when my ex and I had our son, we went back and forth on talking about whether to introduce him to Santa Claus or not, and we ultimately decided not. And the only place that has ever actually caused him trouble is that, when you're dealing with a bunch of kids your own age who do still believe in Santa Claus, you either have... an 8-year-old's either going to wind up blurting it out, or he's going to be highly trained in the notion of lying to people.
That's a good point.
Yeah. So I mean, this problem has come up because so I'm of actually three minds about this. On the one hand, I don't think that really believing in Santa Claus is necessary or does anybody any good. On the second hand, I feel uncomfortable about my kid interfering, let's say, with the way that other parents have decided to raise their children. And on the third hand, when it came up and he started telling people at around age 5, what, you think Santa Claus is real? I had to tell him, don't tell other kids that Santa Claus isn't real. And he said, you want me to lie to them? So, that was kind of awkward. And the way I eventually came up with explaining it to him was I said, grown-ups play a game with kids. They're not going to keep lying to them forever. Most kids believe in Santa Claus. Grown-ups know that there's no Santa Claus, and so it's kind of like playing a joke on somebody. Now you're in on the joke. So you're going to have to play along and keep the secret, because that's the way it is. But, don't in any way mistake this for thinking that you ought to believe in stuff that isn't real.
I have a sister who's 9 years younger than I am, and it was always fun with her, sort of being in on the joke.
Okay. Did she? So she did believe in Santa.
Yeah, because since she was 9 years younger, she believed in him longer than I did.
Okay. How old was she when she found out?
I think she was 5.
Okay.
She figured it out pretty early, actually.
Oh, okay. Good.
Sir.
How did that go?
My mom was a little bit disappointed. It felt like all of her kids were grown up and decided to continue doing Santa anyway.
Okay.
So
let's see. Yeah, we always just told him that we're the present givers, and when I did actually take him to the mall a couple of times, and I would bring him to the Santa line and say, look, there's a guy dressed as Santa Claus. And all those other kids believe in him. So the question was, is telling my kids that Santa Claus exists the same as telling my kids that gods exist? Here's one thing I would say in support of telling your kids about Santa Claus. I think, I saw it summed up in a poster once where there was a picture of a very, very poorly disguised Santa, and the caption on the bottom says, "Dear kids, one day your parents will tell you the truth about Santa Claus. When they do, be sure to ask them more about God." A lot of Christians are, in fact, distressed about the idea of secularizing the holidays and having all this Santa Claus stuff around, especially because when kids find out that Santa Claus is just an imaginary story that people told them to make them feel good, they are naturally going to make the logical connection. What about this God person? He's still real, right? it's possible that Santa Claus is actually the greatest tool for undermining Christianity that's ever been invented, but I wouldn't count on it. So that's all I can say. Lauren in Indianapolis, IN is Indiana, right? I have a friend who is overall incredibly intelligent, but he continues to believe that there is like this magical energy or something. My question is there a better approach to take than to rely on logic and reason?
Not sure I understand the question.
I guess that's it. I'm not sure I understand the question because, okay, there's a way of being logical that doesn't amount to talking like a professor. I mean, you know, we've been criticized on the show. We've mentioned it several times that after so many years of experience doing this show, we kind of like assume that people have watched every previous episode and would, for instance, be bored with another person throwing out Pascal's wager, and so instead of going through the motions of taking 10 minutes to explain what Pascal's wager is and why it's fallacious, we just say, "Oh, you're pulling Pascal's wager on me!" Ha 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 ha. And then, you know, we've been getting some negative feedback because when we say, like, you know, "Oh, you're just using the argument from ignorance," everybody is saying, "What's an argument from ignorance? You know, are you calling him ignorant? That's mean." Mm-hmm. There's a way of approaching logical issues that basically involves sort of coming up with as clear and direct and short an answer as possible through the use of creative analogies or something, or sort of arguing somebody into a contradiction that is so stark that they can see what the contradiction is. So I wouldn't say abandon your logic and reason, but I would say come up with ways to make things interesting. Like, for instance, if somebody were to call me and say, I don't believe in God or anything, but I believe that there's a magical energy or something, then I would probably start questioning that person to elaborate on that. Like, what kind of magical energy do you believe in? What does it do? How do you know that it's out there? And there's a couple of ways this conversation could go. So you would have to kind of ad lib, depending on which direction he went in. So he might come up with some specific things that the magical energy does, and we could say, like, aha, well, we can test that. Can you think of some way that you could distinguish whether or not this magical energy actually exists? Or he might say, and this is common among people who adopt some sort of feel-good generic theism where they don't want to defend any of their views, they might say, "Oh, I don't know what it does, I just know that it's out there." And I might say something like, if you don't know what this thing does, if you don't know what this thing is like, if you can't define it to me, then what's the difference between the universe having this magical energy and not having this magical energy? I mean, how is this magical energy not just something made up that actually doesn't do anything at all? So, yeah, I think that's where I would go with that. Any other comment? Nope. Yes? What? No. Okay.
The last question
Next.
is related to that one.
Oh, the last question. Okay, so am I an atheist if I believe in the supernatural but not God? Yes. If you don't believe in God, this is Scott from Luana, Iowa, I think. I'm terrible with these state abbreviations. If you don't believe in any gods, then you're an atheist by definition. Now, having said that, people can still believe in all kinds of other things that are not supported by evidence. And you can be an atheist who doesn't necessarily stick to secular, rational, scientific method-y logic stuff.
Or
that came out great.
or an atheist who practices pagan-inspired magic.
Yeah. You could be like an atheist who believes in the Tao, which is this, supposed energy that flows through everything. And I don't want to say that anybody is not intelligent for believing in this sort of thing. I mean, sometimes even as a metaphor, stuff like Eastern religions or vague abstract religious concepts can help people think about things in a particular way. Like there are these things called Zen koans, which are sort of funny statements that sound like fortune cookies and maybe internally contradictory and don't make sense. But they're kind of cool to think about because, they shift your frame of perspective. Or people can believe that meditation has some sort of transcendental spiritual effect. And it might turn out that meditation can be useful to you because it can relax your mind, it can clarify your thinking. Maybe getting away from the computer and email for a little while and just sitting there and focusing on your own thoughts can actually be beneficial to you, even if there is no actual supernatural component. So I don't want to insult anybody's intelligence for having a supernatural belief. And I certainly wouldn't say that that they can't be an atheist as long as they don't believe in God. Having said that, if you watch this show for any length of time, you're going to find that most of the hosts and co-hosts are people who are generally in agreement that learning things about the world through the scientific method is the most useful way to go about things. And that just like there's no good reason to believe in God, you probably shouldn't go ahead and believe in fairies or leprechauns or ghosts without some kind of good reasoning, which can be backed up by some kind of systematic investigation like science. How are we doing? Okay, we have made it through 45 minutes, and I think this would be an ideal time to mention that if you were dissatisfied with today's show and would like to show up and get more satisfaction by talking to real live atheists, we will still be going to Threadgills after the show every week. Remember, the show is down to an hour, so we're going to be done in about 13 minutes here. And then we are going to head right over to Threadgills. We're only going to Threadgills for the rest of the month. After that, we are going maybe to El Arroyo for a little while, or maybe we're going to go someplace else. So stay tuned to the show and the blog to figure it out. Right there on the TV screen is the address for Threadgills. So come hang out with us and laugh at me for the way for all that I had to put up with today.
Laugh at me for not being there.
Yes. Well, I think you are an extraordinarily brave person to show up on camera for the first time with no material or anything. So thank you for joining me today.
Okay. Yeah.
No, we're getting a little smattering of applause out in the audience.
Thank you.
And by the way, if people badmouth you in email, they badmouth us too, so just let it roll right off.
All right.
Let's see. Daniel in Phoenix, Arizona says, I no longer believe in heaven, hell, or God, but because of the way I was raised, I still have an intense fear of hell. How can I get over this irrational fear? I never believed in heaven, hell, or God, so I don't have that irrational fear, but I hear it's common.
It is.
How do you feel?
If I stop and think about hell for longer than about 10 seconds, I start to feel afraid of it again.
Okay. Would you say it has gotten better over the period of time? I mean, like, did it start out much worse?
Yes, it has gotten much better. I think partially being in therapy for anxiety helped.
Okay. Matt, I remember when he went to the Texas Free Thought Convention, he interviewed somebody, which is on the Nonprofits podcast, who was dealing with something called, I think, post-religious stress syndrome or something along those lines. I'm probably mangling it, but it's pretty common to worry, and I want to correct myself, because even though I've never believed in hell, I've always been steeped in it. I've always been steeped in the culture that believes in heaven and hell, and I've had, when I was a kid, I was in Alabama for a while. I had people tell me that I was going to go to hell. And because I don't believe in ruling things out, but in looking at the evidence for them, there were periods of time where I was, I did give myself over to speculation about whether hell might be real, and worried about it a little. But when there was a period when I thought there might be a God, I mean, first of all, what I know Jeff D., who wishes he was here today, has said in the past, is that when he came to the idea of, when he eventually became an atheist, first he went through a period where he was still a Christian, but at first he was terrified of hell, and then he thought it through and said, if God is supposed to be all-loving, then it cannot make sense to believe in a God who has, who condemns people to be, as Jeff so picturesquely says it, tortured forever! Just for the finite crime of non-believing in him. If there is a God like that, that God is a jerk. So Jeff first came to the conclusion that the God who tortures people forever for not believing probably doesn't exist. And then he came to the opinion that there's probably no God at all. So first of all, I would say, look into some alternate religions, or look into how many religions exist, because there are tens of thousands of different sects of different religions in the world. I think it's tens of thousands just of different Christian sects. And you should realize that even if it turned out there was a God, that wouldn't necessarily mean that hell is real or that you're going there. I always like to throw out the scenario of a prankster God who actually just likes to screw with people, and so he only sends Christians to hell. Or he only sends believers to hell, and all the non-believers go to heaven. That's highly unlikely, but there is no more evidence for the other kind of God than there is for that one. So take that, Pascal's wager.
And it's fun to think about.
Yeah. I mean, it would be nice. It would be amusing being up there in heaven saying, oh man, my Christian friends probably wish they were up here saying they told me so. But if they hadn't told me so, they'd be here now. Going beyond that, I think, Erica's experience is a common one, that it gets better over time. Time heals all wounds, and also wounds all heals.
And just actively trying to not think about hell. Maybe not actively, but somehow avoiding thinking about it does help.
Okay, so just ignore it. Ignore
Yes.
it, and it will go away.
Yes, that.
But I'm serious about reading about alternate religions because, there's two benefits. One is you realize how many different religions believe different things that are perhaps less threatening than the weird fundamentalist Christianity that we have going on in the United States. And the other reason is when you come in contact with how many different beliefs there are, it becomes pretty obvious that, hey, if there was anything to this stuff, don't you think people would eventually be converging on recognizing things that are true instead of just making their own stuff up that none of which agrees with each other? Okay, so Daniel in Phoenix is out. Scott in Luana is out. We got Zach in Monterey still getting stuff that's been screened from the chat room. It says, how would you respond to the Christian rhetorical argument that goes, Christ reveals himself to every human being at some time in their life?
I would ask for some pretty compelling evidence that that's true.
Yeah. Well, the case where this most commonly comes up is in the situation where you as an atheist say, how can the concept of hell be moral? Because what about some bushlander, what about some Aborigine living out in Australia who never hears about God? Why would that person go to hell? And what will commonly happen when this topic comes up is the Christians will obfuscate and say, well, how do you know that he won't find out about about God in some way? Maybe he'll maybe he'll reveal himself through the kindness of a child or something like that. And anyway, it's incumbent on us Christians in the civilized world to go out and take on the white man's burden and preach to those people so that doesn't happen. That is such a dodge. They're trying to get around this problem by asserting something that, as you said, has no evidence for it. You'd need to see some pretty compelling evidence. And the other thing is, when you consider what Christians actually do say about the experiences they've had with God revealing themselves to people, when you really nail it down, they really turn out to be kind of boring. I mean, God was a lot cooler in the Old Testament. He would show up in a burning bush. He would part the Red Sea. He would turn sticks into snakes. And he would come down in person and yell at people and turn them into salt. He would
flame on a mountain.
Appear before. Yes, right. He would appear before Paul on the road to Damascus, strike him temporarily blind. Jesus would show up and wave his hands with the holes in them in front of Thomas and say, "Look, I'm alive." Mm-hmm. And now we're expected to accept as evidence that somebody was late for work one time and God helped them find their car keys. And it's like, when I hear about experiences like that, I just have to say, if that's the way that God has chosen to reveal himself, I mean, if God had revealed himself to me that way, I would probably just say, oh, well, I found my car keys. That was lucky. Or I remember the comedian Emo Phillips doing a bit in where he got sent to jail, and there was this tough guy coming after him, and he says, "Lord," he prays, "Lord, if you get me out of this situation right now, then I promise to go to church every Sunday." And just then a guard showed up and said my sister had posted bail, so I prayed, "Thanks anyway." And we actually made it through an hour. And I am battered, but still, relatively unscathed. And thank you very much, Erica. Thank you very much to our great crew, who I'm sure will have the phones in perfect working condition next week. And that's our show. Goodbye, everybody. Yes, I am.
The content of this video is produced by the Atheist Community of Austin, a nonprofit educational organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. If you enjoyed this content and are willing and able to provide a donation, please visit the website below.